Mhm. Hello, hello. Oh, hold on. My screen went funny here. It just opened up when I had it all like set up. So, okay. I'll start again. So I'll start it soon and different. Um, hello, hello, and welcome to all of you beautiful soul sisters. Thank you for joining me here today on the Heart of the Soul podcast. My name is Amana, and I am so happy that you're here. This is a space where we explore what it means to be wild women walking upon this earth. We connect through the ancient ritual of storytelling, sharing about that which is often unseen and unspoken. It's my hope that soaking in these stories inspires you to harness your own innate knowing and center you into a more embodied and alive version of your beautiful, unique self. Today is Monday, or not Monday, Friday, March 28th, 2025. Our moon is currently waning towards a new moon in Aries and solar eclipse that's happening tomorrow. I have the pleasure.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, that's true. Sorry.
No, it's all good. I have the pleasure of having Lori Pappas here with me today through the Cosmos on Zoom. And I would love for you to just take a moment and introduce yourself, tell people a little bit about you and where you are in the world.
Sure. Well, it's exciting to me that the solar eclipse is tomorrow. I hadn't really thought about it. Thank you for reminding that, Mana. And I love the fact that we're in Aries because I'm an Aries, and that's a good thing. Um, so, like Amana said, my name is Lori Pappas, and I truly have had a wild and crazy life. I currently am 75 years old for a few more weeks. Then it clicks over again, which is a good thing. I love being 75. I think it's the absolute best time of my life. And to tell you a little bit about myself, I started life in in a little bit of a difficult situation. We can talk about that and a lot of childhood trauma. And when I was 17, just turned 17, I was pretty much forced to become the sole support of myself and decide who I wanted to be. And one thing led to another. And I need to take you back in time because that I was born in 1949. So when we talk about me being 16, 17, I'm right in the hippie area, the age of love, freedom, and and that was really the important part of that era for me, my coming of age, was that we were really supported by these wonderful folk singers.
Hmm.
And they really set a tone of peace and love because it was right during the time of the Vietnam War, which was very divisive in our country. And it was such a wonderful counterbalance of Where Have All the Flowers Gone, the songs by Joan Baez, and they played an important part of my life. We'll
Hmm.
come back to that. Anyway, and also it was right at the start of the computer era. And I was one of the first women in the world to sell computers, believe it or not. So when I was like 23, 24, 25, I started selling systems just because, women of my age, if we weren't a nurse or a teacher, we were office workers. And that meant we're the ones that were supposed to handle all the detail. I don't like detail. So I would automate it. And that ended up leading me to becoming a pioneer in systems. I started a software company, was ended up fortunate, successful, sold it when I was 49, and then I tried to retire, and I didn't do a very good job. I failed, so I started another whole career as a humanitarian, founded a charity in Africa, and lived over there for 10 years. So now we're between 57 to 67. And by then I'd had two failed marriages, really had no intention of ever getting tangled up again with another guy, and got bored. My daughter said, well, Mom, why don't you just try to do online dating? Because then you can be in control of the delete key. And I thought, okay, I'll do that. And then I got hooked and I married again, this time to the love of my life. And a couple years ago, I had the energy to start this third career, which I'm now a published author. And my main goal now is to help other women find peace and harmony in their life. And maybe if I can help some of you not make some of the same mistakes I did, that will be a little easier for you. So here we are.
So here we are. Yeah. Amazing. I love that. Yeah, you've had the privilege and honor of gathering this many years, and I only, hope to get to gather as many years as you have at this time. And I can already hear that you've had all these life experiences, so many. Like you said, these multiple career shifts and marriages, and you have a daughter. Do you have other children as well?
I do. I have two daughters who now are both in their 50s. So it's just crazy. It just, that always used to sound so old to me. And now 75
Uh-huh.
doesn't sound very old to me, and except when I'm standing up, but all of a sudden the body creaks, and I think, oh yeah, you do have a few years on you. And then I also have a son.
Mm-hmm.
I have three grandkids.
Beautiful.
So it's great. It's wonderful.
Yeah, I'm 42 now, just so that you also
Yeah.
know how old
Yeah.
I am. Yeah, and I remember thinking 40s seemed like, yeah, kind of older. Not ever old. Like my grandma Elsie, even in her 90s, she would say, "I'm just older. I'm not old," and I love that perspective from her. I wonder if maybe you could take us back to, something from your maidenhood and what a story from there that you feel has something to share.
Sure. I'll be happy to do that. Um, so I was, I talk about winning with the cards that you're dealt, and I think that's a real important concept to share. Well, I was dealt these cards. I was born bright, energetic, independent minded, and not automatic. And I wasn't classified as a good girl, because I sassed and I asked why, and I asked what if, and I said I don't want to listen to that, or don't want to do that. And my mother was a religious fanatic
Mm,
to the extreme, in that every time I walked into the house, she had preaching on the radio, and I would walk up and turn off the radio.
mm,
Or whenever she was asked a question, she basically would talk to Jesus and not talk to the kids. And one day, I was about 13 years old, and I'd had a girlfriend stay overnight. And I'd gone in the bathroom to get ready for the day. And all of a sudden, my mother barges in and locks the door and says, you can't go out and do anything. You've got to clean the cupboard because your Aunt Alice is coming, and I want her to think I'm a good housekeeper. So I looked at my mother and I said, well, if you want Alice to think you're a good housekeeper, clean the house. I mean, to me, that sounded really reasonable.
mhm,
And she started shaking her hand and ranting, saying, you are the devil. What is your name? You're the devil. This can't be my daughter. You must be the devil. What is your name? What is your name? And I thought, wow, you are really lost it, lady. And I managed to get out of the room, and my friend and I left for the day. Well, she wasn't done with me. When I turned back up for dinner, she carted me off to her pastor friend. And then the two of them started trying to exorcise the devil in me. And I remember sitting there thinking, these people are really just weird. But I had no idea what it really did to me. And what it did is it caused me to not only disassociate, so I like would step outside of my body whenever I was uncomfortable, but it also made it really damaged my self-worth because it was like I wasn't worthy of being, I was the devil.
Mm.
And even though I didn't think that, it gets into your psyche. When people abuse you and tell you bad, give you bad messaging, even if you don't think that you're receiving it in, our bodies are not made of Teflon. You know, that stuff gets inside you, even when you don't know it gets inside you. Well, I ended up, my dad just wanted peace in the family. And he ended up committing me to a mental institute. And so, once again, this was in the early 60s. So, I don't know if any of you have watched the show One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest with Jack Nicholson, but it's a real classic and pretty scary. Well, that's the kind of institute I was put in. And they started feeding me pills. But in the early days, the gals from the neighboring room came into my room crying, and she had just had shock treatment. And this is what was going on in those days: shock treatment, lobotomies. And she was afraid she was going to have a lobotomy. And even though I was 16, because it was about this time of the year, um, I thought, that is not a good thing, Lori. You are on a wrong road here. And so I started thinking, you know, I don't have to swallow those pills. I can start pretending to swallow, and I can start putting together a plan to get out. And that's what I did. I didn't swallow the pills. Within 2 months, I managed to get out of there. The only thing I lost was my photographic memory, which, isn't a crisis because you can learn new memories and new techniques to remember. And I set off across country out towards the West Coast to live on my own. And I think my message here is when somebody abuses you, you don't have to swallow it. You have to deal with it. You need to put together a strategy to remove yourself from that situation. But you don't need to swallow and let it get inside you. Mm-hmm. And that really shaped my path.
Wow. Yeah. What an amazing, like not amazing in a good way, but like an incredible experience to have at that age.
Yeah. Well, it was. And everything has pluses and minuses. It does.
Mm-hmm.
So, yes, from one thing, oh my God, that's just horrible. But what it did do was I developed a very thick skin. Mm-hmm. So whatever confronted me, I was able to deflect, hypothetically. I mean, I was able to, my successful entrepreneurial career was in manufacturing. And to be a young woman going in and telling manufacturers back in the 60s, early 70s, how they're supposed to run their business, you got a lot of arrows shot at you. So my lizard skin that I had developed because of my mother's abuse served me well.
Yeah.
But what it did do is that during that time, I didn't really feel. All I could really feel was being lonely and sad
Mm.
because I couldn't afford to let any outside emotions break through. And it wasn't until after I retired that I was able to start peeling away that lizard skin
Mm-hmm.
and learn how to feel. But see, there was a flip side to that too, because when I had kids, and I had my kids in my early 20s and my son when I was in my early 30s, you're really not emotionally available because I'm not feeling. I'm not allowing those feelings to come in. You know, you're dealing with transactions, but you're not necessarily dealing with the emotion.
Right. You can go through the actions, but it doesn't mean that you're fully present. I
You're
think
not
what I
present.
hear I'm saying,
Right.
hear you saying, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I wasn't emotionally available for the kids.
Mm-hmm.
I made sure they were taken care of. And I did all the things, the supposed tos, but when you're not emotionally available, it impacts the child.
Of course. Yeah.
So, you know, one thing leads to another.
Yes. Did you know that they actually still use shock therapy on women's brains who have severe postpartum depression? I
Right.
I can't believe they're still doing that. Like some of these things, like you're speaking about these barbaric things that happen in the medical system that are still happening sometimes these days. And it's just, I can't believe.
Yeah.
Mm,
It really is. I think that's why I'm such a fan of energy healing. I mean, this is definitely off on another subject, but um, you know, being able to access the energy that's available to us is
mhm.
just so amazingly powerful.
Yes, I would love to go down that path in a moment, maybe, but I
But I
would
think we better.
first, I'm curious about you and your birth. So, birth is one of those things that I have been fascinated by since a young child. I've attended births for over 15 years. I birthed my own babies at home. And I'm just curious to hear. I love asking women, especially of different generations and decades, to share about their birth experiences because I know it continues to evolve and things were different. There was the Twilight era where they were putting women in like straight jackets and drugging them and having them, strapped to the bed. And I'm curious if you would mind sharing somewhat about your birth experiences and what that was like for you.
So, are you asking about when I was born into this life or when I birthed my children?
Well, I would love to hear both. When you were speaking earlier, I was like, oh, I should have asked her to start with her own birth into this world from your
Well,
mother.
let
I would, so yeah, go
okay. Well,
there.
because that is really quite a story. Um, so from the time I was a little girl, I was told that um, me being born almost killed my mother.
Mm,
And I was not a wanted child. I was the fourth of four girls. And I my entire life until my mother was 86 and died, I was told she was going to die any day because of her bad heart. And she didn't even die of a heart attack. But anyway, um, but the idea that I was born that you know my formation of a fetus was inside her body was so abhorrent to me that when I started doing my personal work, which was in my 50s, one of the first things that I participated in was a psychodrama. And in that psychodrama, it was a psychodrama of my birth. Because just the idea that I actually had been in this woman's birth canal, I just couldn't fathom it. And so during this psychodrama, they conjured up this whole thing, took me through the Black Hawk helicopter, came in to rescue me out of this birth canal, and down came a rope ladder. And down the rope ladder climbed my two best friends from the rehab center that I was in at the time, dealing with my traumas. And and they did this miraculous rescue of rescuing me from my mother's birth canal so I didn't have to be born from her. So that was the story of my physical birth in this lifetime. Now,
Mm,
with my children, it wasn't dramatic. I mean, I did not have difficult time at I think my oldest daughter, um, I was probably in labor about an hour of hard labor,
wow.
and it was a natural birth. The second daughter, labor was a little bit longer, but not much. They were both smaller babies. And then
Mm-hmm.
with my son, it was a little bit longer, but still that one was also a natural one, and that was with a midwife, which I really, really enjoyed. So
Mm-hmm.
my two daughters, I was delivered by a doctor in the hospital, and with my son, it was with a midwife in a hospital setting, but was much more pleasant. But
Yeah.
none of them were traumatic.
Mm-hmm.
And so my kids were born in 73, 75, and 83.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And
Uh,
at those times, their ultrasound wasn't common. Is that true?
you know, I remember having an ultrasound with my son.
Yeah.
But I don't think I had ultrasounds with my daughters. I don't think um, I don't think they did. I'm quite sure they didn't do that.
Yeah, I was born in 82 and also didn't, I was the youngest of three. And I was also a child
Uh-huh.
that was conceived without intention and unwanted
Uh-huh.
period of time. And I have also reflected and done healing on what that experience would have been like in my mother's womb with,
Right.
you know, growing, but not people not wanting me to be there.
Being not nurtured, not
Yeah.
having that, not having that nurturing environment while
Yeah.
you're in that formation.
Yes. It
So
impacts.
how did you, yeah, how did that impact you?
It's something that I feel like I did go strongly into the good girl role and trying to do everything right and please my mother, please my father, that's what I sort of took on and always had this feeling of I was had this really strong fear of my mother leaving me, being abandoned, things like that came up for me and also just being undesirable to the population at large. And it was just sort of in my 30s that I feel more integrated and healed from that, because I didn't really recognize it until my 20s. And that's when sort of the healing began of recognizing that I had these imprints that I needed to realize that I am worthy and I do have a purpose here and
Mhm.
that I am lovable and wanted and all of those things.
Yeah, and what triggered that? What triggered that healing process for you?
Mm, I I can't recall exactly what triggered it in this moment.
Mm-hmm.
A good question
Mm-hmm.
for me to reflect back on.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
there generally is something that causes, an interrupt.
Yeah.
And I know for me, what caused my interrupt was that um, my son, when he was 19, had a horrible accident. His car slid on the ice, flipped over, spun on the top, and David had a traumatic brain injury.
Mhm.
And to the part where it was midnight and there was a knock on the door and we opened the door and it was the cop and the chaplain.
Mm.
saying that they were holding the ferry for us. We were living on Bainbridge Island off of Seattle at the time, that they were holding the ferry in hopes that we would get to the hospital while my son was still alive.
Oh.
And it not only was it traumatic for him, but it was post-traumatic stress for me. And fortunately, he did survive, and I wouldn't say he's thriving, but he's doing the very best that he can, and I'm very proud of what he's able to do today. And so and he became addicted to pills at the time and to other drugs, and went into a rehab. And because he was in rehab, I was invited to his family week. And I was privileged to be able to listen to therapists talk about PTSD.
Mm.
And when I'm sitting there, I think, oh, I wonder if I've suffered from PTSD, because every time I heard a loud noise or a siren, I just would panic.
Mm.
And and I went up after the class and asked the therapist, and she said, "Oh, yeah." And I said, "Well, by the way, do you think the fact that my mother thought I was possessed by the devil might have had an impact on me?" And she just started saying, "Yeah, lady, I think that probably is so." So I was like 51, 52, something like that. And so,
Mm.
there was an interrupt.
Yeah.
And because of David's misfortune, it sent me on a path of healing.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Have you heard the term post-traumatic growth? Do you feel like you experienced
definitely.
that in that phase?
Oh,
Yeah.
definitely, Amana. Because one thing led after another. And when I learned that, oh, there was something that I could do that might help the relationship I had with my kids, because, I didn't feel I always wanted to be a super mom. All my actions were super mom behaviors,
Mm-hmm.
but I felt like a subpar mom, and I could see my kids struggle. So when I learned that there was some behavior I could change that might have a positive impact, particularly on my granddaughter, because I didn't know at the time if it was too late for me to have an impact on my kids. But I thought, well, my granddaughter at the time was little, and I became very excited. So I just embraced therapy with wide open arms, and
Mm-hmm.
I did it all. Of course, because I'm an
Yeah.
overachiever, I mean, I did it all.
Yeah, so you've done talk therapy amongst other forms. I know you spoke about energy and energy.
Right.
I wonder if you've done like somatic body work. Like, what do you feel? Is there something? I feel like talk therapy is wonderful, and it works in this certain like range. And then for me and lots of women that I've spoken to, there's often another piece that really moves the needle.
Oh, absolutely. I think for my personal healing, the EMDR for post traumatic stress really did, because I was able that helped me move those visual images into the left side of my brain, where I was able to intellectualize what had happened. So no longer was I having to live through the emotional response every time I thought about it. I could just intellectualize it. That was very powerful. But the real home run for me was somatic
Mm-hmm.
therapy. I love somatic therapy, and where you're able to release the trauma that's stored up in your body. And I was able to start feeling. What helped me start feeling was somatics.
Mm-hmm.
And and then, because my that second marriage was falling apart, well, it never really should have been together. But Imago was helpful with that, because it helped me understand the enmeshment that I'd gotten myself into. And it really all went back to those feelings of not being worthy. Because even though I was a very successful entrepreneur and professionally, I won awards and was acclaimed and so forth. My personal life was so different because I wasn't valued, that I was valued because I provided income, but not the real me,
Not
not
in
the
more like a
real
human
being.
way. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
So, um, yeah, I think that, but what really helped heal me was the somatic therapy.
Yeah. So I love hearing that you wrote your book a little bit later in life because I too, I
Mhm.
feel I also enjoy writing, but I have two young children right now and don't write that much. So this podcast is one of those outlets to me. Yeah, to be able to speak and talk, but not write as much. I know that I have at least one book within me that I hope I will have the
Mhm.
capacity to write. I'm wondering if you can tell me a little bit about your book, The Magic of Yes, Embrace the Wise Woman Within, and how like the idea of this book came to be and how old you were when you wrote it, and maybe a little
Okay,
more about how women access that wise woman within.
sure. So, I mentioned that I failed retirement, and I did. I had lived the American dream. I started with nothing. I ended up with money to retire, 49, and that's supposed to be great, right? Well, it ended up getting boring. So, but one thing we did do was travel a lot. And I was in the middle of the Sahara Desert in the country of Niger, and a little girl came up to me and she had flies on her eyes. And I remember looking at her, and the thing she wanted from me was my water bottle, because the most prized possession is a water bottle, because then they have a chance to maybe live, because water is so scarce, and all they want is an empty water bottle. And so, of course, I gave it to her. But as I was looking at her, I thought, gosh, she is about the same age as my little Ella, my little granddaughter, who I just adore. And this little girl standing there, so skinny, barely clothed, holding a sibling about her age. And I thought, this little girl did nothing wrong to be born in this disease ridden life. And my little Ella did nothing spectacular to be my granddaughter. It just was the cards they were dealt, basically. And I made up my mind at that time. I was going to put all my energy and resource in trying to figure out how to get the flies off of these little kids' eyes and get them a chance to have a healthy life. So, being the overachiever that I am, I thought, well, I had started a for-profit business in the US, and it was successful, and I sold it. And of course I could start an international charity. Well, it's a lot harder than the other, but you know, luck was with me, and I was able to put it together. And I ended up working in the one of the most difficult parts of the world, of course, which was the southwest corner of Ethiopia, with 9 different indigenous tribes who were very, very marginalized. And I managed to get money from USA and the UK and the EU and so on and so forth, and hired people and put together all these initiatives doing water, sanitation, hygiene, adult literacy, female reproductive health, schools, environmental, an orphanage. And so busy, busy, busy doing. And when I would be up in Addis Ababa, the capital where my home office was, I lived in a house that had very leaky windows and doors, and it would get very cold at night because Addis Ababa is a mile and a half high. And um, and so when I would come home from work exhausted because of all the communication problems with employees, and I would be harassed by the government and this incessant noise that always is going on in those kind of areas, I'd find refuge in my house. Well, oftentimes there'd be no electricity, and I'd only have the light of my 3 candles. And so I'd put on all my clothes and huddle in my chair, and I was forced to not do because I couldn't see to read or do anything. And it forced me to think.
Mm-hmm.
And I started to reflect. And I started to think, well, what if I just started thinking about all the different things I've learned, all the different lessons, and just reflected on them, and then explored opportunities because of what those reflections were. And what if I started to say yes to just being and not doing? And that brought me to the point of saying, oh, that would be pretty magical to just reflect and be and not do. And then it just came to the magic of yes. And I was able to embrace my wise woman within. And I know for a fact that we all share the same DNA. So if I'm able to embrace my wise woman within, you're able to embrace your wise woman within. And it's, a matter of taking the time to reflect on what the experiences are and what you've learned, and then getting rid of the emotional baggage that keeps cluttering up the picture for you. We need to clean off the screen so that we can see clearly.
Mm-hmm.
And so all that resulted in me writing The Magic of Yes. It took 7 years after I left Ethiopia to have the energy to do it. But I have. It's written, it's published, and now I'm committed to helping others access their wise woman within, so they can experience inner peace like I've been able to do.
Beautiful. For women that are maybe listening and are like, what are you talking about? Like, I don't have a wise woman within me. Like, I see it in other women, but I don't have one in me, or I don't know how to get there. Do you have some practice or a way that you can share for people that can explore that possibility or that absolute?
I do. No, I absolutely do. Because, first of all, I urge you to recognize the fact that you're probably running like a gerbil on a spinning wheel. That you're so, especially for those of you in your 30s, 40s, 50s that have kids, that are in the middle of a career, that have a partner with demands, that have parents with a demand. I mean, you're like a meat in the middle of a sandwich. Everybody's taking a bite out of you, and you're just trying to hold your head above water. And I get that, because I was there too. And what really needs to happen is you need to be able to step off that wheel once in a while. And let me tell you a little story about a friend of mine, a neighbor, in fact, who doesn't have children, but definitely seems to carry the weight of her family and everything else going on her shoulders. And I gave Cheryl a challenge. I said, how about if you schedule in to your day 5 minutes, just schedule 5 minutes where you sit and just look at your surrounding. Okay, I'll try. So 3 months later, I asked how she was doing. She says, well, I haven't done it yet, but you're in my head. I'm thinking about it. I'm really trying, and I haven't gotten there yet. And I said, that's okay. What if we just put it down to 1 minute a day? And she said, okay, I'll try a minute. And once again, a few months later, I asked how she was doing. Oh, can't quite get it. I said, okay, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to give you a rock. And I love rocks, especially smooth little rocks. And I said, let me give you this rock. And all I want you to do is just hold it in your hand once in a while during the day. Maybe put it on your desk at work. Pick it up, just hold it in your hand for a moment and just feel the rock. Just feel the rock. All you have to do. And Cheryl found that she was able to do that. So, what I'm saying, rocks have the energy of the earth and they're so powerful. When I was in Ethiopia and feeling really overwhelmed, I'll tell you what, I slept with a rock in my hand most every night.
Mm.
I'd have crystals in one hand, rocks in the other hand, and that's how I'd sleep day after day because I needed energy to keep me going. And just feeling that rock gave me so much peace. So if you're not ready to really embrace a mindfulness practice, and I even hate to say that because being mindful doesn't mean that you sit on the floor with your legs crossed saying Om. Maybe what it means is while you're stuck in traffic on your way to work, you happen to glance outside and you notice a daffodil has poked its head up. And you look at that daffodil and you say, wow, look at how beautiful that daffodil is. That yellow is so brilliant. Just taking the time to notice the daffodil
Mm.
will help you start becoming aware of what's going on in the natural world.
Mhm.
Because the natural world is so healing.
Yes. Yes. It's one of the reasons I really oriented towards the moon. I mean, I also love the seasons and orienting to move along with the seasons and be cocooned in the winter and more outward in the spring and also throughout my cycle. But the moon too, I love because cycles, of the seasons, we don't worldwide share the cycles of the seasons, and some places have much more temperate climate and don't experience 4 distinct seasons, or they're opposite from the northern hemisphere to the southern hemisphere, but we all share the same moon worldwide. And so I love that way the moon connects us all, just like the sunshine, but that we all have this moon that at the same time, like each day it's in the same phase, whether I'm here or in Japan or in Ethiopia. Like if I were to gaze upon the moon, it's going to be in that same phase, whether it's a crescent or full or a dark moon, a new moon. We all gaze upon the same moon, and not only the same moon, but the same side of the moon, which is just amazing to me.
You know, I the moon was my best friend in Ethiopia
Hmm.
because it was constant. I
Yeah.
mean, you're absolutely what you're saying. The moon was with me when I was visiting my family back in the US. The moon was with me, whatever country I was in. So, guess what my dog's name is?
Luna.
Mooney. No,
Mooney.
Mooney. Mooney. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Because then where we live is called the Valley of the Moon. It just, the moon is such a gift. It's
Yes.
really a gift.
Yes. I mean, and it shifts I also love remembering that it also, without the moon, we wouldn't have high tide and low tide. I grew up, on the Kitsap Peninsula with the Salish Sea. near Bainbridge, where we're in the same area,
Mhm.
and that we wouldn't even have these high tides and low tides and these opportunities to go out and like dig for the gooey ducks and see these
Exactly.
different creatures when the tide is way far out without
Right.
the moon.
Right. And the moon and the tides are extreme in that area. I mean, when we would have the full moon, sometimes that tide would go out 12 feet. I mean, it
Yeah.
was just amazing.
Yes, yes, the pull of the moon.
Yeah.
So I would love to hear, I love asking people this question. What does the word soul mean to you?
Well, soul to me, can I tell a little story before I answer
Absolutely,
that?
absolutely, yes.
Okay. Okay. So picture when I'm finally, I really felt like I escaped to Africa to get rid of my second marriage. And
Mhm.
I wanted to become unfettered and free. So I'm laying in bed in this strange country, not able to speak the language. And I have an epiphany. And it is my mind has been such a bully that my poor body and my spirit had no say in anything. And so I had an intervention with the three parts of me where my mind had to apologize to my body and to my spirit. And that my mind agreed that it would just do the spreadsheet kinds of stuff, the figuring out, the intellectual kinds of activities that I needed to navigate. And that my body would just keep being the soldier that it was, just functioning and doing such a good job, but that my mind agreed to pay attention to my body. It hasn't always done such a good job, but we started that process. And they both my body and my mind agreed that my spirit would be in charge. That my spirit, and I think I'm using spirit instead of the word soul, but I really look at it as very much the same thing, is that it would be in charge, that my soul would be the commander in chief, be in charge of this entire being.
Mm,
And over the years, it's becoming more and more and more in charge. But it's an intentional choice.
mhm. You're choosing to live
Intentional choice.
a more soul-led life, is what I'm hearing
Exactly.
about.
Exactly. So that's what it means to me,
Hmm.
is because, and I really believe that our soul, the way it talks to us is through our intuition. And if we give space and notice what that intuition is saying or signaling, that's a good thing. That's a real good thing. Then we can use our mind to vet information and to help be a buffer and so on and so forth. And how are we going to navigate or how are we going to check things out?
Hmm.
But it's the intuition that's coming from our spirit, from inside our soul, that really is that wisdom. So to answer your question finally about how can the listeners say find that inner wisdom, is maybe you need an intervention. Maybe you need to be like I, where you're laying down and saying, hey, mind, butt out once in a while
Hmm.
and start thinking of your being in these separate parts because they really act differently. My intellect can run 50 miles an hour. Well, my body sure can't do that. I barely can lumber along. And my spirit has the ability to soar. It's not earthbound. It
Mm-hmm.
has the ability to soar. So they're very different aspects of this being whose name is Lori, not the devil, you know.
Yes. Yes. I love the way that you paint this picture of separating them out and the way that that has helped you to lean into and live more from a place of your soul. I love that.
Mm-hmm.
I think
Yeah.
about it as sort of like I have this like inner critic or inner mean girl, which is part of my intellect that tells me I should be doing these things and is like thinking about all the 50 different things that need to be done all the time, and especially with young kids and all the things. And it's also been a practice for me in my, be love becoming my mantra. And like you spoke about earlier, rather than doing, that time with the candle light, that it forced you to have more of that thinking being time. And
Mm-hmm.
that's also been a huge teacher and important thing for me too, to learn how to be. And like you said, like to notice the daffodil or to be in awe over the mountains or the trees or a bird or the clouds, and
Mm-hmm.
how those things can really transform our lives. And sometimes it's just like little by little, like you're speaking about with your neighbor and the rock, and just how just the act of like holding and picking up the stone, and how that can shift our experience in that moment.
Mm-hmm. It does. It really, really does. So that's what prompted me to, um, it helped me come up with a framework that could be used in helping people internalize the messages I was trying to convey in my book in the different chapters. And for example, at the end of the first chapter of Winning with the Cards That You Were Dealt, saying yes to that was a dream framework, and the dream standing for desire, reflect, explore, acknowledge, and a mantra. Because, first of all, we need to articulate what's our desire.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think most people's desire in life is to be the best version of themselves. You know, you want to be the best that you can be, whatever that means. But I know I want to be the best version of Lori Pappas that I can be. And so what do I need to think about? What do I need to reflect about? Well, I have a lot of experiences I can reflect about. I have places that I've visited, things that I've learned. I do need to get rid of the noise, though, that clutters that, like we talked about. Get rid of that emotional baggage so that I can think clearly. Well, what is that emotional baggage? Well, it probably is the supposed tos and the maybe I haven't forgiven myself for being what I consider a subpar mom. Or maybe I haven't forgiven somebody else, and that gets in the way of being the best version I can be. I don't know, but it's something to reflect about. And then explore. Well, that's really the what if. What if I looked at this? Or what if I considered that? Or what if I opened up my mind to this idea or that idea? Or didn't automatically say no? What if I became like an improv player who, whenever they're asked a question, they have to say yes and? I love that. That is such a wonderful thing. Yes and, no matter what the question is.
Mm-hmm.
And then acknowledge, life sucks. It can really suck at times. And some bad things can happen. And it doesn't feel good. But you know what? Why not why not have it happen to me? I'm a person and things happen to people. What would exempt me? So it doesn't matter so much what happens to me. What matters is, what do I do with it?
Mm-hmm.
And do I swallow that victimhood? Or do I say, no, I'm not going to swallow?
Mm-hmm.
And then I really believe in mantras, because that really is what soothes your soul. And we have different mantras for different occasions. I know one of my mantras for the last 15 years has been, I really want to be the source of peace, love, and harmony. And you know what? That's hard for an overachiever and somebody that built their career doing. It's like saying, hey, no more doing, lady. You've got to shift 180 degrees and become a source of peace, love, and harmony, not a competitor, not somebody that's going to buck the system. But it's starting to work. I actually feel like at times I really am a source of peace, love, and harmony.
Yeah, you're practicing the embodiment of that, it sounds like, and
Right,
better and
right.
better. Yeah.
And so it's you know, it's it's a lovely life. It's a lovely, lovely opportunity to embrace, especially when we embrace that wise woman within, and you all have it. It's there. I absolutely guarantee it's there.
Yes, me too. I feel like I remember as a child hearing people around me in the media speak about intuition as though it were not factual and untrue and almost like it was a negative bad thing. And it was only maybe in my 20s where I started to be like that, well, it never really felt right as a kid, but it was like, whoa, people were telling me. So I was like, I guess I must be wrong. And then it's been a development of my intuition because I suppressed it so much as a child because I was told it was bad and wrong and, witchy even or evil, maybe.
Right?
I imagine you probably experienced some similar conditioning.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
But I also feel like right now there's this wave and maybe awareness. There's a broader acceptance of intuition as like a real tangible, important, skill that we can practice and part of our own being that, like you're saying, is that wise woman within that we all have it. And we just have to learn how to access it and also to practice and grow with our intuition and our inner knowing.
Exactly. You're absolutely right, Amana. It's we all have it. And quite frankly, I really don't know if women have it more than men, but I kind of think so. But but trusting your intuition
Mm-hmm.
is a practice. And the more you trust your intuition, the more active that voice will become.
Mm-hmm.
And I can remember after I had left Ethiopia and um, I was in what I consider my recovery stage of about 7 years. All of a sudden, I realized, I'm not taking the time to reflect anymore, and I started missing it terribly. And now it's very much a part of my day. And
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell you the way that it works for me, because I'm pretty busy, even though I'm supposedly retired, but I'm not very retired. Um, is that I swim laps. And when I swim laps, either swimming laps, and the days I don't swim laps, I take a sauna. Those are the best times for me to let my mind settle.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not necessarily thinking, but it just lets my mind rest. The only thing I do when I swim laps is I count the lap. And um, and I find that my mind clears. It doesn't feel fuzzy anymore. And then the time when I get my best ideas is during that 3 mile walk I take with Mooney every morning. And that's when all of a sudden, and I'm sure it's because I'm in the middle of nature. that all of a sudden something comes through, and it's that intuition that to me is just like a gift from above. It's a
Mhm.
gift.
Yeah,
Just
I like that.
lands.
Yes, but what's coming up for me as you speak about that is that if we're so busy in the doing all the time, and people also even on walks sometimes are always listening to something else, their focus is always on something else, or they're like on their phone, that how is a message going to come through if you're always
Right,
and there's sound all the time, that we
right,
need these more quiet moments in order to like hear and receive the messages coming
right.
through.
And I'll tell you, it's so hilarious because I notice so I get up early, and the first thing I do is take Mooney for the walk. And if I take out my phone from my pocket to just check to see if I have something important I've got to think about, Mooney, who is a Australian cattle dog with these huge brown eyes, the second I reach in my back pocket to take that phone, Mooney turns around and she gives me the look.
It
I
holds you
I am
accountable.
I know I'm not exaggerating. She gives me the look, and she really is not happy.
Wow,
Isn't that funny?
that's
But
amazing.
she's
Yeah.
she's got her eye on me.
Yes, I would say like my kids are the same way with that, with me holding me accountable,
Right,
like pick up my phone to check something while we're in the middle of, playing together, doing something specific.
right.
And yeah, yes.
Oh,
So I wonder for you, this is my last question before I ask you to tell
okay,
everyone where they can find you and all,
right.
is what is feeling more true to you now after gathering, 75, almost 76 years of life? Is there something that is feeling like more true than it ever has before at this sort of moment in time in this 2025 threshold that we're in?
You know what it really is? And my husband just mentioned it the other day. I'm actually now becoming to feel that I am worthy,
Mm,
that I really am worthy, and that my being is worthy, not my doing so much, but my being is worthy.
mhm.
So here I am, 75, almost 76 years old, and that's where I'm at.
Oh, lovely. Well, Lori, will you please share with whoever is listening where they can find you, your website, where they can buy your book, and I know you're also
Sure,
Instagram and Facebook, I think, as well.
absolutely. So you can find me almost anywhere with Lori Pappas. And you'll have that in the show notes,
I'll
I'm
have the
sure.
links
So
in the
it's
show notes.
right. So it's loripappas.com. And that really is the best portal because that then gives a link to my newsletter and welcome you to subscribe to that. Love to have you subscribe. And what that is I like to share a glimpse into the path taken by other extraordinary, ordinary women. I just love doing that. And that's my favorite thing to write. And I'm still getting out maybe twice a month. And so you can find links to that there. I have a Facebook group, the Wise Woman Sisterhood, which I'm very fond of. And that's really where you'll connect mostly with me because I monitor that all the time. And that really is a place for women to share and to connect. And we have a great group. Love to have you join that. And then also the Instagram is Lori Pappas. That's got an underline after Pappas. But you can almost find me anywhere with Magic of Yes or Lori Pappas. And my book is on all the online booksellers, Amazon, what have you. And there are links to all that from my website as well.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for your time today and sharing your wisdom and stories here on the Heart of the Soul.
Oh, it's been my pleasure. It's been very fun. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for tuning in and choosing to spend time with me today. I hope that you enjoyed this episode of the Heart of the Soul. I would truly appreciate if you might choose to leave a rating, review, or share the show with someone that you know. You can support this podcast by donating to it using the PayPal or Venmo links. If you have stories that you would like to share on the Heart of the Soul, please send me an email through my website. I would love to hear from you. If you would like to work with me, I have both one-on-one and group offerings, online and in person. Find out more on my website, birthingnova.love. If you're listening on Spotify, you can now even send me a voice message. Until next time, remember, be brave, be love, be wild, be you, because you are the only you, and be the change that you seek for yourself and for the generations to come. Sending each of you so much love. Love, love, love. Mwah.